over to Marshall. Thank you again for joining us.
Hey everybody, as Emily mentioned, I'm Marshal Conley. I'm joining you from Geneseo, Illinois today, and I'm going to share with you a quick set of tips for adapting to everything going on with our schools and kids right now. After that, we'll hear from our teacher guests as they add some real life context to what I'm about to share. So when compiling this information, and really as I've been monitoring and observing everything happening online recently, from Facebook groups to Twitter to everything coming from ed tech organizations and vendors, I realized just how much information is out there for teachers and families, and it's all bombarding us at the same time. So before I get into these items, I want to be clear that these are not the only tips and strategies out there. And none of them are a magic bullet that will solve all your issues and answer all your questions in this continuously changing environment. What these tips are, though, are things that are aligned with what we know from the research on good teaching. And they're also things that are adaptable or well suited for application in an online or blended learning environment. We'll talk briefly, and realistically, we could have full webinars on any of these topics, but we'll talk about universal design for learning, making sure we're working to attend to the diverse needs of all learners, being safe online and good consumers of information, working to maintain positive relationships with students, and attending to equity in what we see as the digital divide or the homework gap. As we discuss, as Emily mentioned, please feel free to connect in the chat by asking questions, engaging with others, and sharing examples of things you're doing related to these topics. So to start, we want to look at universal design of learning, or UDL. And when we say that, we look at UDL as a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. And UDL is centered on 3 principles, which you can see here, and each one is well suited to offer some simple ideas to keep in mind when designing virtual learning experiences. First, we want to provide multiple means of representation and note that learners differ in the ways that they perceive and comprehend information that's presented to them. So when working in a virtual and blended situations, this could mean using video, audio, animation, and other media to allow students to interact with content in multiple ways at home. This isn't just a necessity because you're teaching online. There's also, learning science backing it up. So that's nice bonus. Next, we want to provide multiple means of action and expression with the understanding that learners differ in the ways that they navigate a learning environment and express understanding. So this can mean focusing on project-based learning that allows learners to create their own learning products, including those that don't necessarily require them to use technology to express their learning. Remember, information can be transmitted back and forth online. You may be interacting with students in an online environment, but learning engagement can and should happen in analog too. Online learning is more than just clicking through math drill apps and doing virtual worksheets, and so this reminds us of that. Third, we want to provide multiple means of engagement. Learners differ in the ways in which they can be engaged or motivated to learn. Try to use technology to personalize the learning experience with open-ended activity prompts that serve as jumping off points for engagement, including opportunities for students to create authentic real-world application of learning. Once you're able to work through the overwhelming nature of this challenge, you might find a kind of a new world of flexibility here if you have the space to focus purely on learning engagement with students and kids. So there's a good deal of information on UDL available online, and there's one link here on the screen that captures these guidelines and more that we'd encourage you all to check out. Our next tip is really closely related to UDL. It involves making sure our learners with diverse needs are represented in how we transition to virtual learning. You're undoubtedly awash right now in different types of online resources, and you can be a good partner to families and teachers by making sure that resources are accessible to students with disabilities, English learners, and other groups. I mean, this includes looking for features in technology products like closed captioning for videos, the ability to turn on narration for written content, and accessible user interfaces, things like different input options, use of touch screens, gesture recognition, and even more complex stuff like brain interfaces and haptic feedback. One resource we can share right now is Power Up What Works. There's a link there on the slide. Power Up provides research, resources, and tools to use the principles of UDL and integrate technology to enhance teaching and learning. And you can see here they're at powerup.org, powerupwhatworks.org. And at this point, you've heard me mention a few times the sheer volume of resources and information right now. You can use this as a teaching and learning point related to digital citizenship. Not only can you teach students how to be good consumers of online information and products, but you can model this for students, even explicitly explaining why a certain app or website is a good source and how you came to that decision. This, of course, involves carefully reviewing and vetting digital resources from which you build your new curriculum. And so be thoughtful and understand that free and heavily marketed doesn't always equal quality. And finally, with this, it's always important, but it's very important right now as screen time for kids is skyrocketing, and it's going to continue to increase, is to teach students to be good digital citizens, including how to be safe online, how to interact positively with peers, and how to protect their privacy and identity. On the parent and teacher side, read terms of use and do your best to understand what vendors and platforms are doing with the data they're collecting as your kids use those products. Next, we want to talk about something that can help cope with everything that comes right now with social distancing. All right, having trusted and supportive relationships with students is a promising strategy to help students develop both academic and non-academic skills. And we know from research that students who connect with at least one trusted adult in school are more resilient and have a stronger sense of well-being. That's incredibly important right now, particularly with kids who, due to different and challenging home and family situations, may see that their primary interactions with any adults are with those teachers, and now they're separated from them. So that's important to keep in mind. And when it comes to this tip, I want to stress that working virtually sometimes might feel like you have to be doubly productive or work super hard and focus on justifying the value of what you're doing, because it's not like what you were doing before. But it's also important for kids to get that well-rounded, positive social and emotional experience from schools. These are all things that you can do to work towards that. And I'd say do what you can to disconnect them from academics and let them just be about building a positive relationship. Things like using virtual meeting and collaboration tools to hold online social discussions or classroom community time, publishing a daily message via video or podcast to jumpstart your students' day and let them know you care about them, and using blogs and online journaling to have discussions about student writing that's focused on expression and connection. And of course, interacting in all these environments in a safe and responsible way, as we mentioned before. The last tip we want to discuss is related to equity. In our haste to move online, we need to remember that not every student has access to a reliable device at home. Not every student has reliable high-speed internet connectivity, especially high enough speed that's required to use some of the more sophisticated platforms that they're trying to use. And this is particularly true for kids living in remote and rural areas. Further, kids that thrive with high-touch support and structure may not have an adult at home capable of assisting them with things like accessing content and even organizing themselves and how to schedule their new academic day and answering homework questions. So we want to be sure to understand how these contribute to a still present digital divide in our country and what's known as the homework gap. So you'll see here 3 resources, CASEL, COSIN, and CETA are 3 national organizations doing work in this area. And you can find their help and their resources from these links.